It's a well-known fact at this point that every legend went through several iterations before having their final abilities decided, and luckily thanks to developer showcases or leaked information, we know about some of the legend's old abilities, and some of them are awesome, like Ballistic's old abilities before they were what we know today. Of course today, Ballistic's tactical is a smart pistol that overheats your weapons, but originally his tactical was going to be a sentry gun that you could place down, and whatever gun you had in your hand at the time you placed down the turret, the sentry gun would take, which is a really cool system. So if you had a Volt and threw down your tactical, it would become a Volt sentry gun. I wonder if at the time this worked with red weapons also. I would imagine Respawn would put something in the code so you can't have a Kraber sentry gun, but if you could, that would have been pretty cool. But balance wise, I think Respawn scrapping the sentry gun idea was for the best. Also, Ballistic's old ultimate was very similar to his current ultimate, but instead of his ultimate affecting friendlies with a buff that are near Ballistic, instead he would place down an ammo box, and anybody around the ammo box would get unlimited ammo. Although it seems the ammo box wouldn't grant any buffs that Ballistic's ultimate currently does, like faster reload speed, so I guess Ballistic's current ultimate is way better. Ballistic was originally going to be a pretty dead legend, but Respawn definitely did a good job to make him viable in current Apex. Moving on to Crypto though, these days his drone is pretty iconic, but originally it was gonna look very different, and it almost looked like a real life quadcopter drone. This was one of the concepts for Crypto's drone. It was literally just going to be like a quadcopter drone, but you can still see how Respawn liked the elements of the drone folding up. They also tried this design, which I think is really cool, but it's not cartoony enough for Apex in my opinion, and they also tried this design, and honestly I really like this. Although I think the final design they went with is good because the drone is recognizable and also pretty cute in a weird way. One thing that wasn't cute though was the original concept for Revenant's Stalker passive, which would allow him to crouch at full walking speed, which is similar to his current Stalker passive, but Respawn's plan, instead of making him simply crouch and go at full walking speed, he would instead grow a second pair of legs and walk around like this, so he had a lower profile and probably more silent footsteps, while looking like Orisa from Overwatch. Respawn scrapped this because apparently it was over-engineered. I'm not gonna lie, I'm glad they scrapped this because this makes Revenant that touch too goofy. I don't think they could have made him look cool while doing this. But that's not it for the scrap Revenant abilities in this video. We've got way more to go over. They couldn't stop scrapping abilities for this guy. But let's talk about another legend first, Valk. Her ultimate went through some iterations which honestly I really like the idea of. Like originally, instead of friendlies attaching to your skyward dive with a hose, they would simply jump on Valk's shoulder. But this proved to look too weird for big legends like Gibraltar, so they scrapped this. Then Respawn came up with an idea of extending poles that the friendlies could latch onto, but this apparently didn't deliver on the power fantasy Respawn were looking for. And this concept looks solid, but their final iteration, which basically is what we have today, was actually inspired by how planes refuel in midair. This was how they came up with the concept that Valk could basically tether to her friendly's jump packs and overcharge them to allow them to have liftoff, which is a really cool lore explanation to how she does this. And also her friendlies keep in a fighter jet formation, playing into Valk's pilot persona. No, not that pilot, this pilot. I'm sure she wishes she was a real pilot, but she's just too annoying. And also, fun fact relating to this, when Valk was originally leaked, her ultimate icon was literally just a jet, so Respawn were really focused on this whole jet thing while she was being developed. Here's a lightning round though. Before Newcastle's wall became this, it looked like this, but before it looked like this, it looked like this, so it had a different way of deploying. Although I can see why Respawn scrapped this method of deployment, because I can imagine on weird bumpy surfaces, this method of deployment would get a bit weird, and the way it is now with sectioned walls works very well. Respawn clearly tested this a lot, and the fact that you can smash down this several meter wall on pretty much any terrain is a testament to how much Respawn can problem solve. Conduit is one of our most recent legends, which is weird to think about because she came out several seasons ago, but several years before she came out, she was leaked and we saw some of her very early abilities, and honestly, you can see the idea of them, but you could also see some very obvious flaws with them. Originally, her tactical was called Arc Flash, and it would actually heal your teammates at the cost of your own shields, which is really weird. Luckily, the iteration of what she has today is a lot better. Her passive would allow her to passively heal shield, which I guess meshes with her tactical a bit better, and also you would get a shield boost if you picked up friendly banners. Her shield regen would also boost if you have friendlies nearby. Her ultimate sounds similar to what it is now, but it was probably less wall-like. Apparently her ultimate used to be a cluster bomb that healed Conduit on damage dealt from the ultimate. Honestly, what she is now is her best version, and the fact that Respawn took a year and a bit to iterate from this to this shows how much they work on these abilities and try to balance them to the best of their ability. From the same leak we saw these conduit abilities, we also saw that when Vantage was in development, instead of having a bat for her tactical, she had a little flyer, basically just a tiny little guy, which is really cute. But the tiny flyer was just a placeholder before the Echo model was created, I assume. Vantage used to look like this, and her ultimate basically didn't change from the original leak we saw it as. Although very early in development, she was codenamed Hawk. Moving on though, much like Crypto, Lifeline's drone went through several iterations, and originally, once again, it was a quadcopter. I think this shows Respawn's shift from the Titanfall art style to the Apex art style. Titanfall was always very gritty and realistic. It seemed like everything had a function and every pilot had cool little grounded details, like some pilots would have a mount for a night vision device on their helmet, but Apex obviously strayed away to a cartoony art style, which isn't too bad, but we can see this straying in Lifeline's original art, where her drone went from looking like this, and then eventually, in some prototypes of Apex while it was still being worked on, her drone looked like this, until eventually, it became what we know it as today. Doc. Honestly, one thing I do want to talk about one day is the shift from the Titanfall art style to the Apex art style. I saw this about Fortnite. It honestly made me think that Apex has undergone this to a bigger degree. Moving on though, because Catalyst went through a fair amount of abilities, and she's probably got the most documented development cycle of any legend. Originally, her ability set was going to be completely different. Her tactical was basically a solid block of tar that you threw down and you could use as cover, and also it was only resistant to damage when you stood close to it. This is most comparable to this ability from Rainbow Six Siege. Her ultimate ability was also very similar. It was called the Iron Tower, and it basically just lifted you up to high ground and allowed you to get a better view. This is the most dumb ultimate Respawn have ever developed, honestly. Like, you're just going to get shot up there and you're wasting a whole ultimate to make a tower, seriously. Which is why, later in development, Catalyst would take her ultimate ability from another in development legend called Scryer. Eventually, also, Catalyst's tactical ability was reworked to what it is today, not before looking like this while in development, before reaching its final form. Also, her ultimate used to be a lot thicker while in development too. This is how thick her wall used to be, which is absolutely insane. And if the wall was still like this, you could probably just hide in the wall during a fight and pop a heal. Thank God Respawn didn't go with this. By the way, her passive reinforced used to work on legend placeables, so imagine a reinforced caustic barrel. That would be ridiculous. Wait 1 second. Back to Revenant though, because when Revenant Reborn was in development, Respawn went through a whole set of abilities that they scrapped because they simply didn't work with Apex's playstyle. Originally, he was going to be able to wall run as Revenant Reborn, but Respawn soon discovered that Apex maps simply aren't built for wall running. And you may say Respawn are dumb and this is wrong, but no, the only time wall running works in Apex is when you play as a shadow and you have a massive speed boost to help you create and maintain momentum. When you actually try to use wall running in Apex with normal legend speed, it just doesn't work as well as it should. And this is coming from someone who's literally tested it in R5 Reloaded. His ultimate ability that was scrapped was a 1v1 fight in the void. Respawn only described this scrapped ability idea and said it simply didn't flow, but in a weird roundabout way, we do actually have gameplay of it courtesy of Apex Mobile China, as one of the legends in that game has a 1v1 ultimate ability. And this is it. Basically, you select somebody you want to pull it into the void, you press a button, you pull them into the void, everybody around you disappears, you fight them, and then you come out. Honestly, it's not an ability that's meant for Apex. Maybe games like Valorant it works in, but not Apex. The time to kill is too high, and the reliability on teamwork and the flow of the game is just something you have to consider. So eventually, Revenant Reborn was reworked, and we got Forged Shadows and Shadow Pounce. One legend who didn't necessarily see big changes to her ultimate is Loba, but we got to see some early development footage, first of all, of early Loba and her early ultimate. Her ultimate was originally built to look like an expensive piece of jewelry, and it definitely achieves that, but it looks very different to what it is now, mostly because this is just a very early idea and model. As you can see here though, it did look a lot more like a diamond than it does today, although the hitbox looks huge, so I'm glad they changed it. Also, Bloodhound may may have originally had an ability to do with a spear, because in a lot of Bloodhound's early footage, we can see them holding a spear. Although I'm not going to speculate too much, I just like the idea of Bloodhound potentially having a spear-based ability. One set of scrapped abilities that I'm glad Respawn scrapped, and they should never ever consider again, is Seer's original set of abilities. In an interview, developers came out and said Seer was originally an audio-based legend. Yes, a legend with audio-based abilities in Apex Legends. It almost sounds like a joke, but Respawn were actually serious. His tactical was going to be a decoy grenade that could imitate weapons firing, much like the decoy out of Counter-Strike, and other times it could imitate footstep audio. It sounds like a joke. I promise you it's not a joke. Respawn were actually considering this. But apparently, within playtesting, the fake audio was too problematic on the game's engine, and also for the players. Apparently, it kind of broke the game. His ultimate was also a sphere ability, but instead of tracking players within the sphere, it would basically lock all sound inside. So it was hard for people to hear you fighting to third party you. And Respawn, I don't know what was happening the day you decided to make an audio trickery based legend, but it was extremely tone deaf. One legend who I think has had no ability change since the very early days is Gibby though. In the earliest screenshots we can see of Apex development, we can see Gibraltar, and he's always had his arm shield device, and I assume he's always had some sort of dome shield device, as he was originally just going to be a pilot in Titanfall 3 before Titanfall 3 was turned into Apex Legends. But tell me, which ability are you glad Respawn scrapped?